Harvey and Holly, and thank you so much for this interview. So, to start with, I just wanted to ask you, how are you during this lockdown, and how do you manage to go through this during your daily life?
Well, I am okay. My family's good. It's been a very interesting experience worldwide. I mean, New York is has been going through some pretty hard times here, but fortunately, everybody in my family is okay. But it's very serious. I mean, and just here, I've had my neighbors in my building. I've had several families that were sick with coronavirus. My next door neighbor family, one of them died from it. I actually saw him get carried out on a respirator, and he was dead just a few days later. And I have people sick on the both sides of my apartment. People sick above me in another apartment. But I even had family members that were sick who fortunately got better and didn't you know didn't suffer too badly, but but it's serious, and that really brings it home for me. When it doesn't get any closer, when you have family members and neighbors, and you're experiencing it like that, it's real. And I have friends who work in some of the emergency services in the city, so they're out and running around in the city, and they're letting me know what they're seeing. And one friend of mine who works in sanitation was telling me that literally in front of every funeral home, they have like refrigerated trucks to store the bodies because there's so many bodies that they can't store them. So, this shit is no joke. And, but, you know, we also have to be, we can't give in to hysteria or fear or panic. We have to be very realistic about these things. And the fact is, this is not the first time that mankind has had to deal with something of this kind. We've dealt with diseases and viruses and pandemics and all kinds of things like this before, and we will survive it. Of course, obviously, a lot of people have died. More people will die, but they will develop. They will develop ways to deal with this, our immune systems, and they will develop, shots and vaccines and so on. And just like, other disease, other flus have killed people, it's difficult times, but we will get through it. And I think the most important thing right now is that people respect each other's space. And, I always wear a face mask when I'm going around other public areas. If I'm not around other people, I don't wear it. If I'm very often, I'll just have it around my chin until I see people coming, and then I'll put it up before I get near them. But I think as long as we all are aware, it's just most important to respect each other's space. Even if you're somebody who doesn't believe that it's that dangerous, or somebody who thinks it's a big conspiracy or a big bullshit lie, whatever, still out of respect for everybody, other people may be afraid. Other people might have health issues that may put them at risk. So just in order to put everybody's minds at peace, I think it's a good thing for everybody. Even as life starts to get back to normal, we should still practice respectful behavior. Whenever I have someone walking towards me this way, I always take a couple steps this side. They take a few steps that direction, and we just keep a cautious amount of space and cover our masks, and eventually we'll get through this. It sucks.
I totally agree with you. Thank you for sharing these feelings with me. So I also wanted to ask you, how does it make you feel to finally play again under the name Cro-Mags?
Well, that is a huge burden off my back. Um, there was obviously a long fought battle for that, and the truth is I actually always owned the name, and that's really the joke of the whole thing is A lot of people don't realize that, that was never in question. But you know, what happened was I actually invited the old singer back into the band, and I guess that, it turns out was a mistake because, I did that. This was a long time ago. And then I had kids and stuff, and I knew I wasn't going to be able to go out on tour so much. And he started like booking tours as the Cro-Mags, knowing that I wasn't able to go out. So it's like, wait a sec, dude. I just like invited you back into the group that you hadn't even been in for like years. You weren't even in the fucking band. And then he started booking all these tours. And next thing I know, he's out booking shows. And I'm like, what the fuck is going on? So I spent the next few years like sending cease and desist letters to booking agents and sending cease and desist letters to people who were bootlegging merchandise, and I actually wound up getting a lot of people talking shit about me because of it. Like, let it go, let it go. But I'm like, dude, what fuck, I mean, you're talking about let it go. I mean, I just got fucking completely fucking fucked here and ripped off. So,
Yeah.
So they basically knew, and he knew that going through the legal process is a really expensive thing. So they basically were just like, fuck you, do something about it. So I spent a lot of years just like sending, you can only send so many cease and desist letters. And if you don't back it up in court and go through the process, it really doesn't amount to much. And I wasn't able to. I had 2 kids. I was living from, my paycheck, from fucking hand to mouth, trying to just survive. And they knew it, and they really took advantage of it. And I was even trying to say, what can we do to work shit out? Like, how can we, what the fuck here? And, all this PMA talk just amounted to a bunch of bullshit, really. And eventually, me and my wife wound up in a situation where, like, we couldn't really afford to do it, but we said, fuck it, we're going to do it. I actually, I just couldn't take it anymore. I was out here recording records that I was paying for the recording sessions myself out of my pocket. I was booking shows under different names and just wasn't getting the same respect, even though everybody knew I was the songwriter. Everybody knew I was the person who came up with the name. I wasn't getting paid as much. And it was a fucking joke, because as soon as I started advertising myself as Cro-Mags, all of a sudden I was getting paid like 3-4 times the amount of money to go out and do the same job. So you know what? I had to fight for mine. That shit was mine, and by fighting for it, so the point I proved to myself is that if something is yours, if you believe in it, you have to fight for it. And once I got my shit back in order and stopped these guys from using my name, everything fell back into place. As soon as the record labels knew I was working on getting my name back, pow, I got not just 1 record deal, I got 2 record deals. As soon as I got my name back, I started getting shows like left, right, front, and center for 3-4 times the money that I was getting. So, fuck it. It was a long fought battle, and it was worth it. But there was never a time that I had closed the door on talking to any of the other members about trying to do something together. I was always willing to speak to them about it, and nobody else was. And to be honest, I have no regrets. I'm not looking backward. I'm looking forward. Let me put it like this: if 4 adults can't say, wow, you know what, we have thousands of people worldwide, like literally so many thousands of people that would be so happy if we could just do 1 show together. And if that's not important enough for you to be able to say, you know what, let's do it. If your bitterness and your anger and your pride and ego is so fucking powerful that you cannot make thousands and thousands and thousands of people happy just for fucking 1 hour of putting your fucking shit aside, I have to say that I think there's something seriously fundamentally wrong with you. If you can't see that greater good is more important than your personal bullshit, when life is so incredibly short and you have that gift, you've been given the gift, that key, that you have the key to go unlock all that happiness, and you fucking would rather not. Wow, you know, fuck, man, that's a fucking damn shame. So you know what? I have a great lineup of guys on this record. You know, all guys who played in the Cro-Mags. Rocky George was on Cro-Mags records. He was on a great Cro-Mags record. Gabby Abularash was on Cro-Mag records. I toured with both of them. And Gary Sullivan, I've been playing with him in the Cro-Mags for the better part of 20 years. So this lineup on this record is absolutely 100% a Cro-Mags lineup. You know, I don't know how many albums it'll last. I don't know anything anymore. You know, we're in a pandemic. You know, right now, who knows what the future brings? But I do know that all you can do is the best thing you possibly can do every time. You know, and I put together a great lineup of players. I put together what I think is a great album. I'm very happy with it.
Wow, this is amazing. About the new record, what was the creation process of your new record called In the Beginning, and what inspired you for this one?
Every day is inspiration. You know, all you have to do is look around you and see what's going on in your surroundings and in the world and in your personal life, and there's all the inspiration you need. So that was not difficult. You know, actually there was so much inspiration, you know, and the writing process. I went into the recording studio with some of the songs already written from beginning to end, and a lot of them I went in with the parts, and I didn't have a complete arrangement, and I kind of finished writing them in the studio. That way, I had a combination of like something that sounded really very thought out, and also something that was a little bit more freestyle. Because I find that as a musician, some of the best shit comes up when you're just having fun and you're just creating on the spot. Like it's like that moment, the creative moment, is when it's fresh. And if you capture it right then, sometimes it's the best shit. Sometimes if you've practiced it 20 times, by then you've lost the fire. It's already lost the magic. So I go in with a certain amount of shit really planned out, and then a lot of it I allow to kind of create itself. You know, I have the ideas, but I let them develop on the spot, kind of. I find that works for me.
Okay, I totally understand that. And actually, regarding the song The Final Test on the new record, I figured that vocals are quite different from what we are used to with you. And I was wondering why this sudden change.
Did you say the lyrics or the voice? It went...
About the voice,
okay,
you know.
The sound of it. The sound.
Of course.
Okay, yeah, you know what? Okay, for instance, on the first few songs where I'm more or less like barking at the microphone, that kind of is, for me, I want to say kind of just my comfort zone, where I naturally kind of go to that place when I'm doing hardcore type of music. But it's not necessarily my favorite thing that I am able to do, but I'm not 100% comfortable when I'm in front of the microphone in the recording studio. So sometimes I wind up just doing whatever feels natural, and I don't really execute what I envision so much. You know, I just do what is natural, and I find that when you do what's natural, it really comes off usually the best. So I don't really care about that, but that's why like some of the songs are more just direct and more like barking like a pit bull, and then with other songs they speak to you and they just tell you that's not what you need to do on this. You need to do something else. You need to find some other way to do this approach. And The Final Test just really was hitting me like that. It was like, you can't bark your way through this one. This one, needs something that's a little bit more ethereal, more melodic, and more spacey, or I don't know if esoteric or spacey are even the right words, but something that was a little bit more just different. And I kept hearing in my brain like doubled vocals, like one trailing the other. And it was just something that I kept hearing, like that would sound cool. I don't know why. I just think that would sound cool. And then I did it and I liked it. And, you know, but I wasn't sure if it was cool or not. And then I was like watching this Marvin Gaye documentary, and they were talking about how he was doing a lot of that on some of his records. And I'm like, oh yeah, like on What's Going On, Mercy, Mercy, all that shit. He's got all kinds of vocal tracks all over the fucking place. And I was like, you know what? Fuck it, I'm doing it. Me and Arthur, the producer, Arthur Rizek, he was like, yeah, it sounds great to me. So I know some people are gonna think it sounds a little weird or this or that, and I just thought it was. I don't know. It's just the way I felt. I didn't try to. Some people are saying, you know, I was trying to sound like HR or some shit. I don't think I sound anything like HR. I do think the song has a little bit of Bad Brains-ish vibe to it, but I have a much deeper voice than HR, for starters. Number two, I could never sing like him if I wanted to in a million years. I mean, he's an amazing singer, and me, I try to work within the limitations that I have and just do the best that I can with it. And you know, so you notice I didn't really push myself to any crazy places vocally. I just did what felt comfortable and what sounded good to me, you know.
Of course, I get this. And actually, I want to ask you something. Can you tell us a bit about the quarantine show you gave in March 2020? Like, how did you get this idea to start with, and how did it feel like to play without your current audience?
You know, well, the idea happened because we had a show scheduled for that day. And we were supposed to play with Body Count at Webster Hall, and the show got canceled. So we had been practicing like the whole week leading up to the show. We were like excited to play. We were ready to play. And then this fucking coronavirus shit happened. And as it kept getting closer to the show, we started getting a little worried that it was going to get canceled. But the venue kept telling us, no, it's happening. Don't worry. It's still happening. All the way up until like 48 hours before the show, they were still saying it's still happening. Don't worry. The show's still happening. And then the governor announced that they were no longer permitting gatherings of large gatherings of people. And we were still like, is this show happening or not? And so with less than 24 hours before the show, we found out that it's definitely not happening. So we were like so ready to play, and we wanted to play so bad. And we were like, well, fuck, what do we do now? And, you know, my drummer actually lives in Germany. So like we had flown him all the way to New York. My one guitarist lives in California. So he was like, we had everybody here. We were ready to play. And so we were like, well, what the fuck do we do? So I just said, you know what? I'm going to set up our gear as if we're doing a show. We're going to put up our backdrop, and we're going to film the show, and we're going to broadcast it on all my social media, just live for everybody. And, you know, right now, everybody's stuck in their house. Everybody's freaking out all over the world. This will be, I think, a great way for us to give something to everybody, and a great way for us to deal with this fucked up situation. So we wound up doing that. We literally just showed it on my social media, and that show got over 200,000 views. You know, I mean, there was like one watch party with like 1,700 people or more in it. And that was just coming up as one fucking view on my feed. So like it really went worldwide fucking crazy because, you know, I mean, everybody was stuck at home and everybody's freaked out. And I guess everybody was really happy to have a concert given to them when there was nothing going on. And I was just happy to be able to be of some help. You know, as a musician, as an entertainer, that's like my job, right? Is to help people blow off some steam and to bring some happiness and some, hopefully some education. So
Yeah.
You know, so I was, and you know, I was recently in a movie, and so I knew all these people, all these film crew. So that's how we were able to pull it together. We rented a
Oh,
rehearsal.
that,
Yeah, we rented a rehearsal studio, a big one. We brought all our gear. We set up. We called up the film crew, had them come in. They brought their cameras, and we pulled that shit together. Yeah. And now that may very well be, you know, a normal thing moving forward. You know, even when concerts go back to happening and are more normal again, I'm sure that this is still going to happen because, you know, shit, it's actually a great forum. You know, it's a great way to do stuff. I mean, it offers people an opportunity to go to shows that they might not otherwise get to see. You know, I mean, I'm sure a lot of people would like to go to Hellfest and, you know, Fest and Fest and this one,
absolutely.
who simply can't travel to other countries and afford to do that. So I'm sure people would love to be able to pay a ticket price to watch at their house and have a party with their friends. And fuck, you know, more power to it. You know, and it was a little weird playing to no crowd, but you know what? To be fair, I have so much fun when I play that just playing with my friends is a fun time for me. So I always put all my energy into it. I always work up a sweat, and I just had to play like I'm playing to the people on the other side of that camera. So instead of saying, you know, let me see your hands, I'm like, let me see your emojis. You know, I just had to kind of make a little bit of humor out of a very awkward situation. And sometimes you have to just, you know, make the best of something,
Of course.
turn it into something good, you know.
Yeah, you're totally right. And actually, you play music since you were 12 years old, and you really seem to crave the need to keep writing and playing, right? And I was wondering, how do you keep finding this strong will again and again?
It's just like you know, why does a fish swim against the stream to go back to where they, you know they have to go. It's just it's my nature. It's in me. I can't help what I do. I'm a creative person, even if I didn't have a forum, even if I didn't have a record deal. Like I was saying before, even when I didn't have a record deal and I was making records before this record came out, in between the last 20 years of Cro-Mags, I was paying for the recordings out of my pocket, out of my payroll, from my work. You know, like I'm always going to be a creative driven person. That's just, and actually I started playing when I was like 7 or 8 years old, and actually, you know, it was just like my first single came out when I was 12. But I'd been playing already for years. And my first book, the one that Allen Ginsberg did the introduction on, that shit came out when I was like 9, and I was actually 7 when I did it. So I mean, I just, you know, I was just lucky, I guess, that I had a mother that encouraged that, and people around me that encouraged that. You know, people who were willing to allow a child to be creative. You know, some people
Yeah.
stamp that out of their kids. Some people, you know, don't want their kids to go down that road. My mom was a hippie, so I think she was happier for me to go down a musical road than had I become like a lawyer or something. She would have probably been like, you know, unless it was for like civil rights.
I get this. And actually, regarding your past, your childhood, and everything, I feel that you really faced the evolution of the hardcore scene in New York. And actually, do you feel some kind of nostalgia regarding the first years of the movement?
Well, you know what? I actually, the fact of it is, you know, I was part of the punk rock scene before the hardcore scene existed. So, you know, me and my friends were really just the ones that put punk rock into fourth gear, which was hardcore. You know, it was just punk. Yeah, it was just the evolution of punk rock. Actually the first generation of hardcore bands, all the bands that we all consider to be the first generation of hardcore bands, all of them thought they were playing punk rock, more or less, you know.
Yeah.
And then they became the blueprint, or they became the archetype of hardcore. You know, Bad Brains, Minor Threat, Black Flag, Circle Jerks, all the way to Cro-Mags. You know, all these bands. Well, I mean, we came out of the hardcore thing, but me as an individual, I came from the generation before it. I preceded the hardcore scene. I was, you know, I was a punk rocker in the '70s, so you know, I started very young. And for me, the golden years, if you would, of hardcore were definitely the '80s. You know, I mean, because
Yeah.
I mean, you know, that's not to say that there hasn't been a lot of good bands since then. Of course, there has, but every genre of music, every youth culture, whatever you want to call it, let's be honest, it's always the first few years that are really the most inspired, because that's when the rules haven't really been laid out yet. And that's when everybody's kind of, you know, if you listen to the first generation of hardcore, you know, every band kind of had their own style, and there was a lot of different variations within that.
Yeah, that's right.
It wasn't until like the second or third or fourth generation where everybody really started to kind of sound the same, and there kind of became a stereotype of what was expected, you know, and all of a sudden you had you know, here's the mosh part, you know, okay, everybody ready, you know, and it's just like, it really kind of became very almost contrived or pre-planned. And you know, so then it loses its way, and it starts becoming more of a Xerox copy and more of a fashion replica, you know, less of a statement and more of a replica. And you know, this shit happened with punk rock too. I mean, shit happened with hippies too. I mean, it happens with everything. It's like the first few years, you know, the first few years of punk rock, it was, you know, there was so much different shit going on that all kind of fell under the punk rock umbrella. But, you know,
Yeah.
I mean, X-Ray Specs didn't sound anything like the Sex Pistols, who didn't sound anything like the Damned, who didn't sound anything like the Clash, you know, and,
Right.
and you know, and who didn't sound anything like Susie and the Banshees, who later on it was cool to like her if you were in hardcore or whatever. But meanwhile, it used to be cool to like all of that shit, you know. And if you go back, it's like the Bad Brains didn't sound anything like Minor Threat, and they didn't sound anything like Black Flag, and they didn't sound anything like the Circle Jerks. And so it was like, so it's always the early generations that really have the, you know, because the rules have not been laid out yet. Once the rules have been laid out, shit starts to get less creative and less spontaneous. So
I totally agree with you.
you know,
This
that's
is so true.
not to say there's not a lot of good bands. I just, you know, I just don't. I listen to the stuff I grew up on more than anything else.
Yeah, I totally agree with you about that. And last question, about 3 years ago, you actually released your biography called Hardcore Life of My Own.
Yeah.
And I want to know, what was the principal motivation to write this book? And did you wish to share your memories and maybe tell the truth about some events in your life?
Well, all those reasons, yeah. But really, when I first started writing it, to be honest, well, I guess it was like in the '90s when I first started trying to write it. I was not going through a very great time in my life. I was, you know, I had kind of fallen back into some extreme drug use, and I really didn't see myself lasting very long the way I was going, because I had already had a pretty up and down life. So I was like, how many times can I go down before I really just go down for the last fucking time here, you know? So and at that point, it really dawned on me that, you know what? I've already established my name and my history to a point in punk rock and in hardcore, to where, especially now in the computer age, my history's out there. People know who I am. And I've become an iconic figure, quote unquote. And I say that laughingly, of course, for those who, if this is written, I don't want people to think that I'm over here like
No.
Right. You know, it's obviously but the fact is once you've established a certain amount of fame or whatever, people are going to tell your story after you're gone, whether you like it or not. And I just knew that if I died without telling my story, a bunch of other assholes were going to tell it, and they were going to lie, and they were going to tell their version of my story, and most of them were going to do self-serving bullshit versions. I was like, if I don't tell my story, I'm going to have some asshole like Paris writing a book about me and the real truth about it, and they're going to talk a bunch of shit, and they're going to make me out to be somebody that I'm not, and they don't even know my actual experiences, and they don't even know what I actually went through, and whoever winds up writing it, whether it's some asshole journalist or some fucking jerk off, it's going to be a bunch of bullshit. So I better start writing it all down now so that if anything happens to me, at least it'll be written down. And this, again, it was while I was still fucking up really bad. So I started basically writing down not just every memory that I had, but I was literally also writing down my demise as I was experiencing it. So as I was going out and getting high and getting fucked up, I was writing it down. I'm like, I just went out and, you know, copped such and such and did such and such, and now I'm doing blah, 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 blah. So it started actually turning into like a journal, as well as every memory that I could remember. Like I'd get high, and then I'd just sit there, and in my highness, I'd just sit there thinking and remembering, and I'd write down as well. And then I wound up with all of this stuff written down. And then I started, as I got my shit together, I worked on this fucking thing for ages, right? And then eventually, you know, I got my shit together, and I wound up rewriting it 2 or 3 times. And then I went back and I literally fact checked everything in it. I found people who were there for every situation, every story, people, just to get a timeline, just to make sure that I put everything in the right place and made sure it was right. And also, before I even got that far, you know, I met my wife, and you know, we were not seeing each other. We didn't even know each other, and you know, she actually interviewed me for a website that she had, you know, and long story short, you know, I showed her some of the stuff I was writing, and she's like, "Wow, this stuff's really good, but you know, you desperately need an editor because basically it was like one sentence. There was like no punctuation. It was just like the shit started and it just blah, 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 blah. Like it was written like it was written by a fucking lunatic, but she could tell that there was a powerful story there. So, and she also knew my history. So I knew she had a PhD, and I knew she was a good writer, and I asked her if she would help me with the editing, and she said sure. And I started bringing her all the chapters and sending her all the stuff that I had written, and she basically helped me weed through all of it and turned my words into what you read. She didn't write any of it. She turned it into something that was readable. And
all right,
you know, because you wouldn't have been able to read it if you would have read what I handed her. You would have been like, oh my God, this is like the rantings of somebody who's on all kinds of fucking drugs, you know. But she was able to add all to make it readable, you know, without taking any of the stories away or changing the language. It stayed my voice, but she made it readable. And then that's, you know, and then right when we thought the whole fucking book was done, the Webster Hall situation happened, and then like pow, all of a sudden I had to fucking write a whole nother chapter because you know, because all that happened. And then, you know, I was almost done with the book, and actually I let Anthony Bourdain read it, and I let him read the first few chapters, and he thought it was a really good book. And he's like, you know, the one thing I think is that you need to write a little bit more about your family, a little bit more about your mother, and whatever you do, be honest about everything and don't hold anything back. And I took his advice, and I went back in, and that was it. That's how the book was written.
All right. Well, thank you so much, because this interview was absolutely fascinating.
Thank
and
you.
I really hope You're well, and thank you so much for your time.
It was a pleasure, and thank you for doing the interview. And hopefully next
Welcome.
summer when we're touring, maybe we can catch up in person and do it again.